Let me tell you something that life taught me, not through books, but through womb. Rising invites noise from below. It's a simple truth, but one that reveals itself fully only through experience. The moment you begin to ascend, whether it's in status, success, discipline, or peace, you will notice a change not only in your environment, but in the people who once stood silently around you. Suddenly they speak. Suddenly they watch. Suddenly, their silence turns to sound, and not applause, but disturbance. When you are at the ground level, people are comfortable. They see you as one of them. They tolerate your presence because it poses no threat. They might even offer fake smiles, casual support, or empty encouragement. But all of that changes the moment you start to separate yourself, the moment your focus sharpens, your results improve, and your habits become more refined. You disrupt the comfort of those who remain stagnant. They start to feel exposed, not because you've said anything, but because your growth becomes a mirror reflecting their inaction. They don't want to look into that mirror. So instead of rising with you, they throw stones at it. They question your intentions, mock your efforts, minimize your achievements. It becomes less about what you're doing wrong and more about the discomfort they feel watching you do right. The sound comes in subtle ways at first. Passive-aggressive comments, fake concern, or humor disguised as criticism. And if you let that bother you, if you let it reach your spirit, it begins to chip away at your focus. But you have to understand the dynamic for what it truly is. Noise from below isn't feedback, it's interference. It's the frustrated reaction of those who wish they had your discipline, your resilience, or your vision, because rising costs something. It costs comfort, it costs popularity. It costs fitting in. And most people are unwilling to pay that price, but when they see you pay it, and worse, see you win because of it, they can't help but feel challenged by your existence. They may laugh louder when you fail, not because they hate you, but because your fall validates their excuses. They may stay silent when you succeed, not because you don't deserve praise, but because their pride can't afford to clap. That's the psychology of noise from below. It has less to do with you personally and more to do with the discomfort of watching someone do what they were too afraid to try. Your focus, their laziness visible. Your growth makes their stagnation harder to justify. So they make a noise, not to be heard, but to get your attention, to break your rhythm, to slow your momentum, to force you to look down when all your energy was meant to go forward. The temptation is strong to respond, to clap back, to prove them wrong. But every time you do, you shift your eyes away from where you're headed and give power to what you've already passed. That's the trap. That's the gravity that tries to pull every rising person back to the level they escaped. But you have to rise above it, not just physically, but mentally. You have to become deaf to irrelevance, not arrogant, just unmoved, because not all sound is meant to be acknowledged. Some of it is meant to be endured. When the jet takes off, the noise is loudest at liftoff, but it keeps ascending. And as it climbs, the voices on the ground become faint. That's the energy you need. Rise anyway. And let the noise serve as confirmation, not a distraction, because no one throws stones at what isn't moving. No one criticizes what isn't doing something worth noticing. The noise is not the problem, it's the proof. Criticism often comes from inferiority, not authority. It's one of the most misunderstood dynamics in human interaction. We are taught to listen to feedback, to stay open to critique, to welcome opinions that challenge us. But the truth is, not every voice that speaks into your life deserves a seat at your table. Not every critic is coming from a place of wisdom or experience. In fact, much of the criticism you will face, especially when you begin to rise, is not rooted in guidance, but in insecurity. It's not coming from above you. It's coming from beneath you. People often confuse volume for value. Just because someone is loud, persistent, or even emotionally charged in their opinions doesn't mean they have something worthwhile to say. Often, those who shout the most have the least clarity in their own lives. They aren't speaking from knowledge, but from discomfort. They see something in you that disrupts the narrative they've built for themselves. Maybe it's your confidence. Maybe it's your ambition. Maybe it's simply your refusal to settle. Whatever it is, it pokes holes in their self-image. And instead of looking inward to confront their own shortcomings, they choose the easier route, tearing you down. You can tell the difference between constructive criticism and critical noise by the intent behind it. Constructive criticism comes with context. It comes from someone who has been where you are and wants to help you go further. It's specific, respectful, and delivered with a sense of responsibility. But criticism from inferiority is vague, mocking, and often laced with sarcasm or bitterness. It's not about helping you grow. It's about trying to make you small enough that the critic doesn't have to feel uncomfortable in your presence. Inferiority masks itself in many forms. Jokes that cut too deep, advice that's really disguised envy, opinions that seem more interested in how you look than what you've accomplished. And when you start moving differently, elevating your mindset, setting higher standards, that inferiority flares up in those who have chosen comfort over growth. They begin to resent you for embodying what they're unwilling to pursue. They critique not because you're wrong, but because you remind them of everything they could be if they had made different choices. This is especially common in familiar environments. Friends, family, coworkers. The ones who have seen your earlier versions often struggle the most with your evolution. They knew you were still figuring things out, when you were unsure, when your light was still dim. But now that you've grown, now that you gain direction, they find it harder to relate. Instead of rising with you, they resist you. Not because you've changed for the worse, but because your progress exposes their stagnation. And rather than confront their own lack of movement, they criticize yours. It takes strength to keep going in the face of that kind of noise, because criticism from inferiority can be relentless. It knows exactly where to hit your doubts, your insecurities, your past. It tries to cloak itself in concern, pretending to help when it's really trying to halt. You'll hear things like, "Don't get ahead of yourself," or "You're not the same person anymore," or "Who do you think you are?" These statements aren't rooted in truth. They're rooted in fear. Fear that you're becoming something they can no longer control, categorize, or compete with. The key is to recognize the source without internalizing the message. When someone speaks down to you without having walked your path, without understanding your mission, and without offering anything except criticism, you have to stop giving their words power. You don't have to argue. You don't have to defend yourself. You just have to keep moving. Because real authority doesn't feel threatened by someone else's success. It uplifts it. It encourages it. It recognizes the grind and respects the journey. Inferiority, on the other hand, thrives on comparison. It needs someone to look down on to feel tall. And when it can't find someone beneath it, it tries to pull others down to that level. Your job is not to convince inferior minds of your worth. Your job is to walk in it, to own it, to build in silence and let results speak louder than rebuttals. Eventually, the noise fades, the critics tire, and the same people who once doubted you will sit in the shadow of what you breathe out with their approval. That's when you'll understand fully. Their criticism was never about you. It was always about what you represented, a reminder that they could have risen to if they had been willing to do the work. Engaging with negativity empowers it. That's a reality many people don't learn until they've wasted time, energy, and emotion trying to correct, defend, or prove something to those who were never truly listening. Negativity feeds on reaction. It gains strength not because it is rooted in truth, but because it's given attention. And attention is a powerful currency. When you respond to negative energy, even if it's to reject it, you are still feeding it. You're giving it space in your mind, weight in your decisions, and a voice in your world that it doesn't deserve. The moment you stop to address every insult, every rumor, every misjudgment, you start playing on the level of the person who threw it at you. You descend from your direction to entertain their distraction. And in doing so, you place yourself in a position where your focus is no longer fully yours. It's shared with someone who never had the discipline, the courage, or the clarity to walk the path you're on. That's how negativity wins, not by outworking you, not by outsmarting you, but by diverting you. When people throw shade, they're hoping you stop to stand under it. They want your response more than they want to be right, because in many cases, they know they're not right. The negativity isn't about truth. It's about disruption. It's about projecting their own frustration onto someone who's moving in a way they can't. When you respond, You validate their effort. You confirm that they have enough influence to disrupt your energy. Even silence becomes loud when it's intentional. But once you respond, once you let the negativity set the tempo, it begins to shape your rhythm. This is not about avoiding accountability or pretending criticism can never be valid. It's about recognizing what is real and what is noise. If someone comes to you with respect, insight, and the intention to help, even if their words are sharp, you can tell the difference. But negativity rarely comes dressed in that. It comes with sarcasm, with passive aggression, gossip, with spite. It's designed not to build, but to bruise. And bruises take energy to heal. Energy that's been spent building something meaningful. Negativity is like a parasite. It needs a host to survive. Without your attention, it starves. But when you invite it in, when you reply to that comment, when you react to that post, when you argue with that person who never wanted peace to begin with, you become that host. You allow something toxic to grow in the space meant for purpose, for clarity, for forward motion. What you focus on grows. That's not just a saying. It's a law of attention. Water weeds and they'll overtake the garden. Water your vision and it will flourish. Sometimes silence is your loudest answer. Sometimes moving forward is the most effective rebuttal. Let the results speak. Let the work compound. Let the distance grow between you and those trying to pull you into a petty orbit. Because once you're entangled in negativity, it slows you down. Your thoughts begin to shift from creative to reactive. Your emotions get stirred by people who don't matter. And before you know it, you're living on defense, trying to maintain peace in a battlefield you should have never stepped into. It takes maturity to realize not every insult is an invitation. Not every attack requires a counter. Some things are best left to die in silence, because the more time you spend trying to correct people who are committed to misunderstanding you, the less time you have to build with those who truly see you. The need to be understood, to defend your name, to fight every fire with fire. It's a trap. And it keeps you stuck in places you've already outgrown. You do not need to light up every room that throws darkness your way. You just need to keep your light steady. Eventually, people will see what's real. The truth doesn't rush. It doesn't stand. Quiet, firm, unshaken. And it always outlasts noise. So when negativity shows up, and it will, let it echo into emptiness. Let it circle you without entering you. Let it burn out, unacknowledged and unfulfilled. Because it can only thrive if you give it breath, and you've got better things to breathe life into. Your success is built on unseen effort. That's the part most people will never fully understand. They see the outcomes, the results, the applause, and the recognition, but they rarely witness the struggle behind the scenes. They don't see the hours when no one was watching, when you showed up tired, discouraged, or uncertain, and still chose to push forward. They don't see the nights spent wrestling with doubt, the early mornings fueled by discipline rather than motivation, or the sacrifices made when comfort was an option and you said no to it. Success is quiet at first. It doesn't begin with praise or celebration. It begins in solitude. It's forget in the repetition of small choices that seem insignificant in the moment. Choosing to study instead of scroll, choosing to practice instead of party, choosing to keep your word when no one else would know if you broke it. These moments don't make headlines. They don't get shared on social media. But they are the bricks that build the foundation of everything you become. People like to believe in luck when they see someone succeeding. It's easier to chalk someone's growth up to opportunity or timing than it is to acknowledge the relentless consistency behind it. Because if they acknowledge that, it would mean admitting that success is not reserved for the few. It's available to anyone willing to pay the price. But most aren't. And rather than face that truth, they diminish what they don't understand. They say things like, "You're lucky," or "It must be nice." No, realizing that what looks like overnight success took years of invisible grinding. What they don't see are the decisions that cost you sleep, relationships, and sometimes even peace of mind. They don't see the quiet moments where quitting seemed easier, where the path forward was unclear and yet you pressed on. They don't know about the rejections you took on the chin, the setbacks you turned into fuel, or the personal battles you fought just to stay focused. Success demands a kind of patience and endurance that doesn't look pretty. It's not always inspiring. Sometimes it's just survival, but you kept going, and that's what separates you. The world notices you when you've already crossed a finish line. But you know the real race happened in the background when you were still training, still failing, still figuring it out. No one clapped for you then. No one posted about your progress. You had to be your own motivation, your own accountability, your own reminder of why you started. That's the work that can't be faked. It can't be bought or borrowed. It's yours, earned and paid for in full behind closed doors. People may try to imitate your success, but they won't be able to replicate it. They didn't go through what you did, because it's not just about the end result. It's about the mindset, the endurance, and the self-belief built through the process. The outer success is just a reflection of the inner transformation. And that part is invisible to the world. But it's everything. It's the difference between those who make a moment and those who build a legacy. So when others speak on your name or judge your position, remember that their words don't change your journey. Let them speculate. Let them guess. Let them minimize. None of it touches the reality of what you've been through. You earned your space not with shortcuts, but with consistency, not with applause, but with persistence. And you carry that within you, whether anyone sees it or not. But you have the power. The real reward of success isn't just what you gain, it's who you become. The person who kept going, it would have been easier to stop. The person who stayed disciplined when excuses were available. The person who worked when no one noticed. That kind of success, the kind built in silence, is unshakable, because it's rooted not in what others gave you, but in what you gave to yourself when no one else would. Silence is strength. It's not weakness. It's not avoidance. And it's certainly not surrender. Silence is one of the most powerful tools a person can possess, because it takes far more control to remain quiet than it does to react. In a world where everyone rushes to speak, to defend, to prove a point, the one who chooses silence is often the one in control. Silence is the choice of those who no longer need validation from noise. It's the decision to withhold energy from anything that doesn't deserve it. It's the discipline to not give attention to what seeks only to distract or provoke. There is strength in not answering every insult. There is strength in letting people think what they want without feeling the need to correct them. Because the truth doesn't get weaker when it goes unspoken. It remains. But you have the power, and over time, it reveals itself without needing to be shouted from the rooftops. People who know who they don't have to argue with those who don't. Silence is the mark of inner stability, of a person who no longer flinches at ignorance or craves applause. It means your peace has become more valuable than your pride. Most people are addicted to response. They feel uncomfortable with stillness, with letting things pass. They need to be heard, to be right, to defend every slight against them. But that kind of urgency is often rooted in insecurity. Silence, on the other hand, is rooted in self-assurance. When you know what you stand on, but you have the power. You don't have to explain yourself to every passerby. You don't have to unpack your entire story for someone who's committed to misunderstanding it. You don't owe access to everyone who demands it. Sometimes the most strategic move you can make is no move at all. There's a discipline in silence that words often lack. Words can be twisted, taken out of context, thrown back at you. Silence cannot. It's untouchable. It makes people uncomfortable because it offers no foothold, no emotional reaction to grab onto. That's why people will often try harder to get a response when you give them none. The silence unsettles them more than anger would, because silence leaves them with only themselves and their own reflection to wrestle with. It forces them to deal with the discomfort of being unheard, unanswered, and unfazed. There are times in life when your silence will speak louder than your voice ever could. Not everything deserves a statement. Not every situation requires your side of the story. Silence, when intentional, carries weight. It says, I've said all I need to say. It says, you're not worth disrupting my peace. It says, my time is too valuable to waste on proving something to people who already made up their minds. And more than anything, it says, I'm not controlled by what happens around me. I'm guided by what's within me. Silence is not always passive. It can be a strategy. It can be a shield. It can be a statement of maturity. In conflict, silence often de-escalates what words would inflame. In tension, silence gives space for clarity. In growth, Silence allows you to work without interruption. People who learn to value silence are often the ones who make the most progress because they're too focused on becoming better to keep explaining that they are. There's also a wisdom in silence. The wisest people aren't the ones who talk the most, but the ones who know when not to talk. They know when to hold back, when to listen, when to let time do the talking, because silence has its own language. It creates space for truth to unfold naturally. It allows falsehoods to expose themselves. It gives room for people to show who they are without interference. And most of all, it protects your energy from being spilled in directions that lead nowhere. In moments of anger, silence is restraint. In moments of judgment, silence is dignity. In moments of pressure, silence is composure. When you master silence, you master yourself, because anyone can react, but not everyone can remain centered in the face of chaos. Silence doesn't mean you don't feel. It doesn't mean you don't know. It means you've chosen to rise above what's trying to pull you down. It means your focus is stronger than your ego. In a loud world, that kind of quiet is power. So let them talk, let them speculate, let the noise carry on. You don't need to raise your voice when your presence already speaks volumes. Keep building, keep growing, and let your silence echo with the strength of everything you've endured and everything you're becoming. Because in the end, real power doesn't announce itself. It simply shows up unshaken, unmoved, and unmistakably certain of its place. Let your silence do what noise never could. Command respect without asking for it.